Andrew Jackson, 1835. It happened at a funeral on a damp January afternoon in 1835. As President Andrew Jackson stepped out of the U.S. Capitol rotunda, the crowd bowed respectfully, until a man pushed forward, raised a pistol, and pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing. Lawrence, an unemployed house painter, dropped that weapon, drew another, and again, click. Another misfire. 2 guns, 2 failures, in heavy Washington humidity. In that instant, the 70-year-old president, already known for duels and battlefield scars, didn't dive for cover. He lunged. Swinging his hickory cane, Jackson struck the attacker again and again until guards pulled him away and the man was wrestled to the ground. Witnesses said the president's fury was stronger than any fear. Later, tests proved both pistols worked perfectly. They just refused to fire at that exact moment. Statistically, the odds were near zero. The would-be assassin, Richard Lawrence, claimed voices told him Jackson's death would free the nation of debt. Doctors deemed him insane, but the event shook the Capitol to its core. America had never seen its leader attacked in public before. Out of that chaos came the first real talk of organized presidential protection, decades before the Secret Service even existed. And Jackson's reaction sealed his legend, the iron-willed populist who, when threatened with death, literally beat back danger himself.
Abraham Lincoln, 1861, The Baltimore Plot. Months before he ever took the oath of office, Abraham Lincoln was already a target. It was February 1861, and the nation was tearing at the seams. Southern states had begun to secede, and hatred toward the president-elect spread like wildfire. As Lincoln's inaugural train rolled north, crowds gathered at every stop, but in Baltimore, something darker waited. Allan Pinkerton, head of a private detective agency, uncovered a chilling plot. Extremists planned to stab or shoot Lincoln as he changed trains at the busy Calvert Street station. The timing, the route, even the crowd control had all been studied. It was the perfect trap. If Lincoln followed the public schedule, he'd be walking into an ambush. Pinkerton urged an immediate change. Against his own instincts, Lincoln agreed. Late that night, while most of America slept, he boarded a small train in plain clothes, coat, hat, even a shawl borrowed from a companion, and slipped quietly through Baltimore under guard. The next morning, he arrived safely in Washington, unseen by the mob waiting for his daylight arrival. News leaked soon after. Critics mocked him for sneaking in like a thief in the night. But history proved wiser. The Pinkerton warnings were real, and Lincoln's decision may have saved his life, at least for a few more years. That secret ride marked the very beginning of professional intelligence work around U.S. presidents. Ironically, the man fated to die by an assassin's bullet first survived one plot through calm judgment and a willingness to vanish when the nation needed him most.
Theodore Roosevelt, 1912. Milwaukee, October 1912. Former President Theodore Roosevelt stood on the back steps of a car, waving to a cheering crowd, and a flash split the air. A single bullet tore through his steel eyeglass case, his folded 50-page speech, and sank into his chest. The man who pulled the trigger, John Schrank, later claimed the ghost of President McKinley told him to do it. Roosevelt staggered but didn't fall. He felt for blood, found little, and calmly told worried aides, "It takes more than that to kill a bull moose." Then he walked into the auditorium, announced to the stunned crowd that he'd been shot, and launched into his speech anyway. For 84 minutes he spoke, voice steady, words defiant, a crimson stain slowly spreading under his vest. Only when his energy finally ebbed did he allow doctors to examine him. The bullet had lodged safely against a rib, too risky to remove, so he carried it inside him for the rest of his life. The public reaction was instant legend. Newspapers hailed his steel-nerved endurance, and his already larger-than-life image became something mythic. It also forced the Secret Service to rethink how presidents and candidates were protected on the trail. What could have been an ending turned into one of American history's most unforgettable acts of raw, visible courage. The day Theodore Roosevelt literally finished his speech with a bullet in his chest.
Franklin D. Roosevelt, 1933.
5 gunshots explode into the Miami night. The crowd screams and people dive for cover. But in the middle of the chaos, President-elect Franklin D. Roosevelt sits steady in his open car, almost smiling as agents rush toward him. It's February 15, 1933. America is deep in the Great Depression. Banks are failing, families are starving, and the whole nation is waiting for Roosevelt to take office and deliver hope. But before he can even reach the White House, danger steps out from the crowd. Giuseppe Zangara, a frustrated immigrant who blames leaders for his misery, climbs onto a shaky metal chair, raises his pistol, and fires 5 shots toward Roosevelt. The bullets rip into the crowd. One strikes Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak, who collapses into Roosevelt's arms. Zangara is tackled instantly, shouting that he hates all rulers. Instead of panicking, Roosevelt leans toward the wounded. He tells his driver not to move and calmly reassures Cermak, speaking softly as chaos swirls around him. Witnesses later said he never flinched, not even once. Roosevelt survives untouched, but the attack changes everything. Security zones around presidents grow larger, public appearances become tightly controlled, and the government realizes how vulnerable its leaders truly are. And for a fearful America, Roosevelt's steady composure meant more than anyone realized. Before taking office, he had already shown the country that in moments of crisis, he wouldn't break, offering a shaken nation a rare glimpse of confidence and hope.
Harry S. Truman, 1950, Blair House. It was November 1st, 1950, a crisp Washington afternoon. President Harry S. Truman napped upstairs in Blair House, the temporary presidential residence while the White House was under renovation. Outside, 2 men walked calmly toward the gate. Within seconds, gunfire erupted across Pennsylvania Avenue. The attackers, Griselio Torresola and Oscar Collazo, were Puerto Rican nationalists hoping to draw global attention to their island's independence cause by assassinating the U.S. president. They carried Luger pistols and a plan for martyrdom. Torresola approached from one side, firing at close range and striking a police officer. Collazo charged the front steps and exchanged bullets with Secret Service agents stationed at the doorway. The fight lasted barely a minute, but in that minute, nearly 30 shots were fired. Officer Leslie Kofelt, wounded 3 times, returned fire before collapsing, killing Torresola instantly. Collazo was captured alive. Truman, startled by the noise, leaned out his window before agents shouted for him to take cover. When the smoke cleared, 1 officer and 1 assailant were dead. The president was shaken, but unharmed. The failed assault forced an urgent re-examination of how the Secret Service coordinated with local police and defended fixed residences. It introduced new training, communication systems, and perimeter defenses that still influence security doctrine today. For Americans, the message was chilling but clear. Even asleep in the heart of the Capitol, the president was never beyond danger's reach.
Richard Nixon, 1974, Samuel Bike plot. Long before anyone imagined 9/11, a man named Samuel Bike tried to weaponize a passenger jet against the President of the United States. It was February 1974. The Vietnam War had broken America's trust, Watergate was unraveling Richard Nixon's presidency, and public anger simmered everywhere. Bike, a deeply troubled salesman from Pennsylvania, convinced himself that killing Nixon would save the country. He stormed into Baltimore Washington International Airport carrying a pistol and homemade gasoline bombs stuffed in a briefcase. At a Delta gate, he shot a security guard, then forced his way on board a DC-9 preparing for takeoff. Inside, he murdered the co-pilot and ordered the crew to get this plane in the air. Police surrounded the jet within minutes, engines still idling. When Bike realized he couldn't lift off, he exchanged gunfire through the cockpit window and fatally shot himself. The plane never moved an inch. The story barely registered in national news, overshadowed by Nixon's collapsing administration. But inside security circles, it was a wake-up call. Airlines and federal agencies quietly studied the incident, tightening cockpit procedures and beginning the slow path towards stronger airport security decades before terrorism became the focus of policy. Bike's failure showed how a single unstable man and modern technology could ignite a new kind of presidential threat. It was the nightmare plan that came terrifyingly close to foretelling a future no one yet imagined.
Gerald Ford,
Sacramento, 1975. September 5th, 1975, Sacramento, California. Only a year after the Watergate resignation, the country was still raw, divided, and searching for normalcy. President Gerald Ford was walking from the state capitol toward an open crowd when it happened. A young woman in a red dress pushed through the line of onlookers. Her name was Lynette Squeaky Frome, a devoted follower of cult murderer Charles Manson. As Ford stopped to shake hands, she pulled a Colt .45 automatic from under her sleeve, aimed point blank, and squeezed the trigger. Nothing. The gun jammed. The bullet never fired. Secret Service agents lunged, pinning her to the ground, and rushed the president to safety. Ford remained composed, even telling aides to stay calm as his motorcade sped away. Later that day, he continued to his next event as scheduled, determined not to show fear. Frome explained in court that she wanted to draw attention to environmental destruction and admitted she expected to die doing it. She was sentenced to life in prison. The close call stunned security planners. Until then, most threats came from snipers or distant shooters. Now, the danger was literally an arm's length away. The Secret Service rewrote its crowd control methods almost overnight. And history hinged on a single misfire, one jammed pistol that saved a president and silently redefined how America protected its leaders forever.
Gerald Ford, San Francisco, 1975. Only 17 days after surviving a jammed gun in Sacramento, President Gerald Ford faced another would-be assassin, this time in San Francisco. It was September 22, 1975. Ford had stepped out of his limousine near the St. Francis Hotel to greet supporters when a woman in the crowd raised a revolver and fired. Her name was Sarah Jane Moore, a 50-year-old accountant and activist who had been on the FBI's watch list just days earlier. She claimed she wanted to trigger, in her words, revolutionary change. But before she could take a second shot, a former Marine named Oliver Sipple spotted her movement and lunged. His instinctive shove threw off her aim. The bullet whizzed past Ford's head and struck a nearby wall instead. Secret Service agents tackled Moore instantly and sped the president away unharmed. Sipple's quick reflexes were credited with saving Ford's life. Ironically, the Marine originally asked to remain anonymous. His unwanted fame later brought painful personal scrutiny, but his courage became a symbol of citizen intervention. In court, Moore expressed regret yet insisted she wanted to make a statement, not a martyrdom. She was sentenced to life in prison. 2 assassination attempts in less than 3 weeks forced the Secret Service into its most sweeping modernization since the Roosevelt era. New vetting for public crowds, psychological profiling for possible threats, and tighter formation drills. Twice in the same month, luck, instinct, and one brave stranger kept history from turning down a darker path.
Jimmy Carter, 1979, Los Angeles. Los Angeles, May 1979. President Jimmy Carter was preparing to speak to a rally in suburban LA, surrounded by thousands of supporters and television crews. The mood was light, until a man at the crowd's edge drew quiet suspicion. Police approached and found Raymond Lee Harvey, a 35-year-old drifter, carrying a revolver loaded with blank cartridges. When questioned, he told officers an unbelievable story. 4 people, he said, were plotting to assassinate the president from a nearby hotel, and his job was to fire the opening distraction shots. Investigators raced to the location Harvey described. They did find another man, matching part of his account, along with spent bullet casings, but no active weapons, no coordination, and no clear evidence that a real attack was underway. Inconsistent details and Harvey's mental health history made the case murky. Eventually, charges were dropped for lack of proof. Still, the scare rattled planners. For the Secret Service, it was a reminder that threat detection couldn't rely solely on confirmed intelligence. They tightened procedures for crowd screening, cross-agency communication, and behavioral spotting, practices that became standard in decades ahead. Carter continued his event unchanged, calm as ever, never mentioning the incident in speeches that day. Yet that quiet brush with danger marked a subtle turning point, a time when even a whisper of conspiracy forced security to evolve. Sometimes the most successful defenses are the ones the public barely notices, and this near plot proved exactly that.
Ronald Reagan, 1981. March 30th, 1981, just 69 days into Ronald Reagan's presidency, the country was full of optimism, convinced a former Hollywood actor could restore American confidence. Then, as Reagan exited the Washington Hilton Hotel, 6 quick shots shattered the afternoon calm. John Hinckley Jr., a disturbed loner obsessed with actress Jodie Foster, fired a small-caliber pistol from barely 15 feet away. One bullet ricocheted off the presidential limousine and struck Reagan in the chest, lodging an inch from his heart. Another hit Press Secretary James Brady, leaving him permanently disabled. 2 others wounded a police officer and a Secret Service agent. Agents shoved Reagan into the car before he even realized he'd been shot. Only when he coughed blood onto his hand did he say, "I think I've been hit." At George Washington Hospital, he stayed calm and even joked to the surgeons, "Please tell me you're Republicans." Hours of surgery saved him. He left the hospital less than 2 weeks later, waving weakly but smiling for the cameras. The assassination attempt shocked America, yet transformed Reagan's image into one of iron resilience. On the policy side, it eventually inspired the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, named after his press secretary, establishing background checks and waiting periods for gun purchases. Within the Secret Service, it rewrote how agents shield presidents. Training, motorcade tactics, and emergency medical readiness all modernized overnight. Reagan's courage turned disaster into defining mythology, the wounded president whose unchanged humor and poise studied a shaken nation.
George H.W. Bush, 1993, Kuwait. It was April 1993, 2 years after the Gulf War. Former President George H.W. Bush traveled to Kuwait to take part in ceremonies marking the country's liberation from Saddam Hussein's forces. The visit was meant to be a quiet moment of gratitude, and instead nearly became a second war. Kuwaiti intelligence officers intercepted suspicious communications about explosives hidden along Bush's motorcade route. When they raided a warehouse near the airport, they discovered enough plastic explosives to obliterate an entire city block, packed inside 2 vehicles disguised as getaway cars. Investigations tied the operation directly to Iraq's intelligence services, acting on orders to kill the man who had humiliated Saddam during the Gulf War. 26 people were arrested. Each piece of evidence, the wiring, the detonators, phone records, pointed north, straight to Baghdad. The CIA verified the findings, and President Bill Clinton, only months into office, faced a stunning decision: let it pass or strike back. He chose to retaliate. That June, American ships launched 23 Tomahawk missiles into the Iraqi intelligence headquarters in central Baghdad, the first major U.S. military action of his presidency. Bush's close call underscored that ex-presidents carry a permanent target on their backs, symbols not just of leadership, but of national vengeance for enemies abroad. The Kuwait plot proved that even after leaving office, the dangers of the presidency can still follow a man halfway around the world.
Bill Clinton, 1996, Manila. It was November 1996, near the end of a long Asia-Pacific tour. President Bill Clinton was in Manila, capital of the Philippines, preparing for a quiet drive to meet local officials. The convoy moved with its usual precision until, at the very last minute, security agents abruptly changed the route. The public never knew why. Minutes earlier, Filipino police and American intelligence teams had intercepted a chilling message. Extremists linked to international terror networks had planted a massive roadside bomb along the president's original path, wired to detonate beneath a bridge as his limousine crossed. The explosive, nearly 20 pounds of military-grade material, was already in place, rigged with a cell phone trigger. Local bomb disposal units moved in fast. They found the device, disarmed what they could, and safely detonated the remains in a controlled blast hours later. No one was hurt, and Clinton's schedule continued without incident. Details of the assassination plot emerged quietly afterward through joint investigations between Philippine intelligence, the U.S. Secret Service, and the CIA. That quiet crossover of information became a pivotal case study in modern counter-terror cooperation, proof that real-time intelligence sharing could save a president's life. The world never saw panic because there never was one. Thanks to split-second communication, the deadliest part of the story was the timing no one witnessed. The motorcade turned, and history rolled safely on. An unspoken victory earned through discretion and trust.
George W. Bush, 2001, Georgia, 2005. May 10, 2005. President George W. Bush stood before a massive crowd in Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, delivering a speech celebrating democracy's rise after the fall of Soviet influence. Thousands waved flags, the mood was electric. And right in front of the main stage, someone pulled the pin on a live grenade and hurled it toward the president. The device, a Soviet-made hand grenade, landed just 60 feet from where Bush stood beside Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili. It struck a young woman but didn't go off. No one around the stage even realized how close they'd come to catastrophe. The grenade had been tightly wrapped in a red handkerchief, which kept its safety lever from springing free and prevented detonation. For 45 minutes, Bush calmly finished his remarks, smiled, and waved to the very crowd that had unknowingly become ground zero for a potential assassination. Weeks later, Georgian police arrested Vladimir Arutinian, a 25-year-old local who confessed, saying he wanted to send a political message by killing the U.S. president and his own country's leader. The near disaster drew little attention in the United States at first, but within security services, it triggered a sweeping review of soft target vulnerabilities, open spaces abroad where allies handled frontline screening. That day in Tbilisi proved how quickly precision planning can collide with sheer luck. A single jammed grenade kept the world from witnessing another attack on an American president and rewrote how future trips overseas would ever be managed again.
Barack Obama, 2011. It was a quiet Friday evening, November 11, 2011. The Washington Monument glowed in the distance, and inside the White House, members of President Barack Obama's family were settling into a normal night. Then, faint pops echoed down Constitution Avenue. At first, guards thought it was traffic noise, until glass cracked on the upper floors of the presidential mansion. Moments earlier, a man named Oscar Ramiro Ortega Hernandez, a 21-year-old drifter from Idaho, had parked near the ellipse and fired at least 7 rounds from a semi-automatic rifle toward the residence. Bullets struck the second-floor windows of the executive family quarters, one embedding in bulletproof glass directly behind the first family's living space. Luckily, the Obamas were away on an official trip. Staff inside ducked for cover, but no one was hurt. Initially, agents didn't grasp that the White House itself had been hit. It took several days in ballistic testing to reveal the danger had come from an assault rifle fired in anger and delusion. Ortega fled, but was captured within a week in Pennsylvania. The event prompted a full review of Secret Service protocols, perimeter detection, rapid communication, and mental health assessment for lone actor threats in the digital age. Ortega's writings showed deep obsession with conspiracy and messianic fantasies amplified online, an early sign of what extremist radicalization could look like in the 2010s. No lives lost, no injuries reported, but those chipped windows became a quiet warning. Even in the heart of secure Washington, the presidency remains a target, and symbols still invite bullets as easily as words.
Donald Trump 2020 Pennsylvania rally. It was August 2020, deep into a heated election season and the height of the pandemic. President Donald Trump was mid-speech at an outdoor rally in Scranton, Pennsylvania, when suddenly agents on the front line stiffened. A burst of radio chatter crackled through their earpieces. Gunfire had been reported near the outer security perimeter. Within seconds, the Secret Service made its move. Agents sprinted onto the stage, formed a shield around the president, and escorted him quickly behind a wall of armored vehicles. The crowd froze, half confused, half terrified, as security forces scanned rooftops and nearby fields. The would-be attacker, an armed man outside the venue's fenced zone, had been spotted by surveillance cameras and flagged via digital threat monitoring before he ever reached a clear firing position. Local police and federal agents converged, disarming and detaining him within moments. Minutes later, Trump reappeared, calm, a little stern, waving to assure supporters that all was under control. He quipped that the agents did a fantastic job, then finished his speech as planned. Though rarely publicized in detail, the incident reinforced how technology and real-time data had become the backbone of modern presidential protection. Software scanning faces, monitoring social feeds, predicting movement before danger even arrives. The Scranton scare passed quickly, but it carried a lasting reminder. In the digital era, threats evolve as fast as the tools built to detect them, and even the most protected stage can become a battlefield in seconds.